Britain's middle class is collapsing in real time, and most people don't even see it coming. Wages are frozen, taxes are climbing, and the dream of a stable life is slipping further out of reach. This isn't just a downturn, it's the quiet erasure of an entire way of life. Here are 10 reasons why Britain's middle class is about to disappear, and number 2 will shock every Brit. For decades, the middle-class lifestyle in the United Kingdom has been underpinned not just by decent earnings, but by relatively predictable costs for essential services like childcare, healthcare, and education. That model is increasingly broken. Take childcare. A recent United Kingdom report shows that in England, a part-time nursery place for a child under 2 now costs on average around £70.51 per week for families eligible for 15 hours funded care. For families not eligible for subsidies, the cost is much higher. One article estimated that middle-class parents are now £17,000 poorer than they were 5 years ago, in large part because of rising fees for nurseries and after-school care. Beyond childcare, the growing cost burden on the middle class for health and education is clear. Longer waiting times in the public system often drive families toward private services. Higher tuition or extra schooling support is increasingly the norm, and the pressure to invest in extras such as tutors, enrichment, and activities to keep children competitive is more intense. All of this adds up to a major drain on disposable income. When essential services cost more, you either have to sacrifice something else, savings, leisure, home improvements, or risk slipping out of the middle-class comfort zone. The result is that the middle class is less secure, with far less margin for error or for life events. For example, a child needing extra support or other unexpected events. The fact that these services are not optional but expected for middle-class living means this cost rise is more than a burden. It is eroding the baseline of what middle class means. Once upon a time, a middle-class job meant a stable career path, good qualifications, a predictable salary progression, benefits, and the security of staying in the job market even as the economy changed. That is increasingly no longer true in Britain. Automation, outsourcing, casualization, and the erosion of employer loyalty are all eating into the security that once defined the middle class. The United Kingdom's productivity weak spot is well documented. A report showed that real wage growth has stalled as productivity has grown negligibly. When productivity is flat, employers are less likely to provide substantial raises, career breaks become more hazardous, and jobs once considered safe now face disruption. For middle-income workers especially, the risk of being stuck in stagnant roles or roles with degraded conditions, 0 hours, gig work, fewer benefits, is rising. That undermines a core pillar of middle-class identity, the belief that by working hard, you steadily move up, earn more, and have increasing security. Instead, many now feel stuck or at risk of slipping. This undercutting of job security means fewer people can count on promotions or pay rises. The fear of losing their middle-class status is growing. For younger workers in particular, entering the job market in this environment means less mobility, fewer returns on education, and the expectation rising that they will be in jobs that do not feel like the middle-class standard their parents enjoyed. A particularly insidious factor in the middle-class squeeze is the effect of what fiscal analysts call stealth taxes, where taxation rises not because headline rates change, but because thresholds and allowances are frozen, allowances are cut, or benefit entitlements erode. In the UK, this has meant that as wages go up even slightly, or inflation pushes nominal income up, more households are drawn into higher tax bands or lose allowances. The term itself is politically charged. The concept of stealth tax in the UK is a tax collected in a way that is largely unnoticed or not recognised as a traditional tax. For example, during the UK 2022 autumn statement, the independent forecaster warned that frozen tax thresholds would push 3.2 million people to pay tax for the first time and 2.1 million people into higher rate bands by 2027 to 2028. The result? Middle earners see less increase or even a decline in real take-home pay despite working harder or earning more nominally. So while pay may creep up, it is being eaten by hidden tax rises and higher costs. The middle class is squeezed from both ends. Costs increase, but the extra income is gobbled by fiscal drag and increased tax burdens. This erodes savings, investments, ability to pay off debt, and undermines the sense that working hard means you keep more of your money. Home ownership. A defining feature of the middle class has long been owning your own home, building equity, and having relative security. That model is under threat in Britain. According to the Office for National Statistics, ONS, the median house price to disposable household income ratio in England was 7.9 in the financial year ending 2024. That means the average house cost about 7.9 times annual disposable income. In more stark terms, outside the top earners, only a minority can now afford an average-priced home. Analysis shows that only the top 10% of households in England could afford to buy a house costing less than 5 times their household income. Put simply, the ladder to home ownership is collapsing for large swathes of what used to be the middle class. Middle-income families find themselves either locked out of owning or stretched to the brink with high mortgages, high deposits, or forced into renting long-term. Even when buying is possible, it often means high financial stress, large debt burdens, reduced flexibility, and loss of the safety net that home ownership once brought. This shift undermines not just a financial milestone, but a key psychological marker of middle-class stability. When you look around and realize owning a home is no longer realistic, the sense of being in the middle begins to fade. At the most fundamental level, the middle class relies. Real wages have not been stable or rising in the way many people expect. Stable or rising real wages meaning pay increases that at least match inflation and cost increases. In the UK, that has not been happening. A major report by the Resolution Foundation found that workers are £11,000 worse off a year after 15 years of almost completely unprecedented wage stagnation. The same research shows that median household incomes are still below pre-financial crisis levels, when adjusted for inflation in many cases. Meanwhile, cost pressures on households are intense. Inflation, energy bills, housing costs, childcare, and other service cost increases all combine to raise the baseline of what you need just to maintain your lifestyle. Real wage growth has been flat or even negative in parts of the UK, meaning the middle class is not advancing. At best, they are treading water, and at worst, they are sliding backwards. Broken equation. Stagnant wages plus rising costs equals a broken equation for middle-class stability. The sense that your effort will lead to better living standards is crumbling. Instead of moving up, many middle-income households are struggling simply to keep pace. That dynamic alone risks dissolving the separate existence of the middle class as a secure, rising group. Britain's middle class no longer enjoys equal opportunity across regions. Economic prosperity has become concentrated in a few urban centres, particularly London and the southeast, while vast portions of the country experience stagnation or outright decline. According to Financial Times analysis, productivity in London is over 50% higher than in regions such as Wales, the North East, and Northern Ireland. These disparities translate directly into wage gaps, job opportunities, and social mobility. Even when middle-class workers in less affluent regions have comparable skills, they face fewer high-value employers and lower pay growth. This postcode inequality means middle-class families outside the major hubs must stretch harder for the same standard of living, while costs, housing, transport, utilities, still climb at national rates. The government's levelling up promises have so far failed to close the gap. As of 2025, more than half of England's regions still report below average GDP growth compared to pre-pandemic levels. The lack of infrastructure investment further limits upward mobility. The result is a two-speed economy, one Britain of global finance, tech, and opportunity, and another of declining town centres, underfunded services, and insecure work. For the middle class, where you live now largely determines whether you can remain middle class at all. This uneven geography of prosperity is slowly eroding the idea of a shared British middle class, replacing it with pockets of privilege surrounded by regions in decline. The middle class has traditionally relied on saving and prudent borrowing to build security. That balance is breaking down. Over the past decade, household debt-to-income ratios have climbed back toward pre-2008 levels, while personal savings rates have fallen sharply. Data from the Office for Budget Responsibility and the Stone Centre on Socio-Economic Inequality show that middle-income households now carry the highest relative debt loads since 2010, mostly in mortgages, credit cards, and consumer loans. Inflation has only deepened the strain. To maintain living standards, many families have leaned on credit to cover basic costs like energy, groceries, and transport. The average household credit card balance rose 13% year-on-year in 2024, and interest rates above 20% mean debt compounds fast. With limited emergency savings, the median United Kingdom household has less than £2,000 in accessible cash. Any shock, such as job loss, illness, or a rise in interest rates, can spiral into crisis. This fragility undermines the traditional buffer that defined middle-class security. Instead of building wealth, more households are servicing debt. Even mortgage holders who once saw property as a safety net now face refixing at double their previous rates. When you combine stagnant real incomes with rising debt costs, the arithmetic of middle-class life stops working. One unexpected bill or missed paycheck can push families from stability into precarity, an experience increasingly common in Britain's shrinking middle. A functioning middle class depends not only on income, but also on public infrastructure, schools, transport, healthcare, sanitation, and local services. Yet Britain's local authorities are collapsing under financial pressure. Between 2010 and 2024, real terms funding for councils fell by around 40%, according to the Institute for Government. At least 9 councils have effectively declared bankruptcy under Section 114 notices, including Birmingham, Nottingham, and Thurrock, as reported by the BBC in 2024. These funding crises hit the middle class harder than many realise. Rubbish collection, road repairs, libraries, childcare centres, and planning departments all deteriorate, forcing residents to pay privately for services that used to be public. Parents hire tutors because schools are underfunded. Commuters face delays due to neglected infrastructure. Families spend more time and more money navigating crumbling systems. Historical materialism notes that this erosion of collective provision converts what were once middle-class entitlements into private market goods. In effect, everyday life becomes more expensive. The fiscal collapse of local government is not just a bureaucratic issue, it is a direct assault on the stability of Britain's professional and working middle classes. The social contract has quietly changed. Higher taxes, fewer services, and growing frustration. When even solid earners feel their neighborhoods are deteriorating, the psychological foundation of the middle class begins to crack. The British economy has tilted decisively toward the top. Wealth inequality is now at its highest in decades. According to the Stone Centre, the top 10% of households hold over 50% of all UK wealth, while the bottom 50% collectively own less than 9%. Middle-income households, once the bedrock of stability, are being squeezed out from both sides. Financial assets, property portfolios, and inherited wealth now drive upward mobility far more than income from work. Meanwhile, asset inflation, especially housing and equities, disproportionately benefits those who already own them. The middle class, with limited investments and rising living costs, falls further behind. During the post-COVID period, Britain saw a K-shaped recovery. The wealthy accumulated record savings and gains, while average families exhausted theirs. This widening gap erodes social cohesion. As upper-income groups consolidate wealth and political influence, middle-class families find it harder to climb, or even stay in place. The OECD warns that countries with sustained wealth concentration experience slower social mobility and higher political polarization. Britain's trajectory matches that pattern. If these trends persist, the middle will not merely shrink, it will fracture, leaving a small upper tier and a broad base struggling to stay afloat. Perhaps the clearest warning sign of a disappearing middle class is that children are no longer guaranteed to match their parents' standard of living. Historical materialism and multiple academic studies show that intergenerational mobility in Britain has fallen sharply since the 1980s. Today, a child born to middle-income parents has a lower probability of entering the same income bracket as an adult than any post-war generation before them. Several forces drive this: wage stagnation, soaring housing costs, and shrinking access to high-return education. Resolution Foundation estimates that millennials earn 20% less at the same age than Generation X did, even after adjusting for inflation. Property ownership among people under 35 has halved since 1990, while graduate debt and rent burdens have soared. In short, the traditional ladder of upward mobility is broken. This collapse in mobility is not just an economic problem, but a cultural one. The middle class has long embodied Britain's idea of progress, that effort, education, and prudence ensure a better life for your children. When that promise no longer holds, faith in institutions erodes. What is left is a fragile middle, defined more by anxiety than by security. Unless systemic reforms reverse these trends, Britain's middle class may soon become less a social majority and more an endangered memory. If you think things are bad now, wait until you see which regions are collapsing first. Click the video on your screen.